Welcome to you all. Welcome everyone to this most extraordinary, most unusual event. Thank you for joining us, whether you're in the Gordon Zoom audience or otherwise on the live stream of the college website. Welcome to Gordon College, or at least welcome to the living rooms of quite a number of Gordon College students. It's good to have you here. My name is Paul Brink, and I am the co-director of the Jerusalem and Athens Forum here at Gordon. And this is our 16th annual debate. As many of you will know, the JAF debate has become something of a spring tradition here at Gordon. And this year is, of course, most unusual, but rather than interrupt tradition, we decided to make the most of our circumstances, take the debate on the road, as it were, and open it up to Gordon friends wherever they are, rather than in the usual auditorium of the Ken Olson Science Center. I have just a few preliminary things to say before we get down to business. Here at Gordon, as at colleges and universities everywhere, the question of modern technology and its uses is a perennial debate. The ethics of technology, its role in education, its promise and its perils, its effect on our very souls. These are the live questions, questions that have assumed a new relevance in the past several weeks and months. These are also the types of questions with which JAF is vitally concerned. Our central question, what does Jerusalem have to do with Athens, is in an important sense asking how people of faith will relate to culture. And it's hard to imagine anything more central to our culture today than technology. What does Jerusalem have to do with Silicon Valley, we might ask. And so I'm grateful to these 14 students for agreeing to lead us in this conversation tonight. The resolution to be debated tonight reads as follows. The advantages of modern technology outweigh the threat to privacy. It's important to know that these students have been given this topic, and they're not necessarily experts on it. Though this is certainly the sort of conversation we regularly have in JAF, JAF is not a course in technology per se. Significantly, the students received this topic at the end of the fall semester, long before we had ever heard of something called COVID-19. At that point, they were divided into two teams, and they've had to do all the research and work on this independently. My co-director, Professor Hevlon Harper, and I have done virtually nothing. And so we will be as surprised and as interested as any of you in what you hear tonight. It's also important to say that they are also not arguing for positions they personally hold. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe their views have changed over the course of going through this process. But this is meant to be an exercise in oratory, in putting the best face on a position. Let me quickly review the format and then say a little bit about your role, because our Zoom audience has a special role to play this evening. The JAF debate is highly structured in the Oxford style with alternating statements that are time limited. We will begin with an opening statement by the pro team and a rebuttal from the con team, and this will continue in sequence. Before each speaker, you will see a slide which indicates the nature of that speech. Once we get through the statements and the rebuttals, there will then be time for questions from our Zoom audience. And these will be directed to each team by Joanna Wells, who is a JAF staff member. I would just ask you that your question be succinct, that it not be a long comment, and that it be directed to one team or the other. There will also be time for the teams to ask each other questions if there's something they think has not been addressed, or if they want to weigh in on another point. At the end of the debate, after their concluding statements, we will then ask our Zoom audience to vote on which team made the most compelling case for its position. And this is very important. We're not asking you to vote on what you actually think of the resolution. Rather, we're suggesting you sort of step outside of yourself and consider who made the most compelling case for their side. So this will be a little challenging. You should not be influenced by other things like who is in your dorm or who is your roommate, or who is on your soccer team, or whatever, but rather focus on the quality of the argument. This is vital. The students have put in a lot of effort into their research and into their argument, and they're expecting you to put the effort into listening and deciding who made the best case for their position. Let me introduce them now. Normally we would have them enter in through the side doors, but I will introduce them now by listing their names one team at a time. On the affirmative case, we have Abby Beyer, Melody Chan, Megan Corbin, Cam Grinnell, Catherine Hulting, Micah Martin, and Asolia Zormanovna. And it's Melody and Micah who have served as the captains of this team. And on the negative case, we have Bella Christian, Kat Corbin, Megan Haynes, Kenny Kidd, Nathaniel Corty, Joanna Sheldon, and Ben Shepard. And it's Bella and Kenny who have served as captains of this team. And now let me read the resolution one more time, and then we will turn things over to them. Resolved, the advantages of modern technology outweigh the threat to privacy. And we will begin with the opening statement of the Pro Team.
Today, we are presented with a resolution that is asking us to weigh the benefits versus risks. My team and I propose this weighing mechanism, that on the basis of pursuing human flourishing, the advantages of modern technology outweigh the threat posed to privacy. Allow me to first define human flourishing. It is the body, mind, soul, and environment working together holistically towards transformation, fulfillment, and self-actualization. How do we keep striving towards that goal? We see it in technology, which is the application of knowledge and skills to meet human needs and to solve problems, especially over the past 100 years. There are 4 areas where we see that clearly: education, well-being, safety, and health. I will discuss the first 2, while my teammate Catherine will cover the last 2. The first of these values is education. The advantages in this field are enormous, from increasing access to information, to engaging at-risk students, to developing specific skills and encouraging collaboration. When technology is effectively integrated into the classroom, it equalizes access to information, which is crucial for students who have disabilities. For these students, assistive technology has increased their ability to learn and to have a voice in the classroom. For example, students who have trouble speaking can use text-to-speech software to participate in class, while students who are blind can utilize a screen reader on their computer for schoolwork. Dictation software, large print keyboards, and smart pens are just some more examples of what students can use to thrive in the classroom. Technology can also narrow the achievement gap for students who may be at risk for failing courses or dropping out entirely. Winterboro High School in Alabama showed in a 2014 study that interactive learning and technology encouraging exploration and creativity enabled students to succeed. Students completed assignments, shared what they learned, and collaborated with their peers by using blogs and online forums, creating websites and graphics, and developing multimedia presentations. And over a 2-year period, the graduation rate increased from 63% to 87%. And the college acceptance rate increased from 33% to 78%. The researchers concluded that students learn actively and engage more frequently when they can use technology to practice skills and create new content for themselves. Another educational tool is digital simulations or models, which can help with teaching abstract concepts through interactive visual content, provide immediate feedback, and familiarize students with the environment or equipment surrounding a task. In the medical field, students can use a simulation to practice surgery, while in aviation, students can use flight simulators to become familiar with aircraft controls. Technology also opens up more opportunities for communication and collaboration, especially across language barriers. This is particularly true in the work of Bible translation. With the growth of information technology, the length of time needed for translation has decreased, taking half the time as it did before 1980. The reduction comes because of technologies such as word processors and databases, encoding for writing systems, and communication through texting, videos, and audio. Because of these advances, a researcher, Matthias Gerner, predicts that within the next 10 years, the Bible can be translated into every language. Not only do these technologies save time and money, but they also enhance the quality of the work to further the goal of bringing the word of God to people in their native language. This brings me to the second value that promotes human flourishing, which is well-being, specifically in the sphere of economics. Dr. Kristen Cooper, a Fulbright scholar and a professor in the economics department here at Gordon, says, technology drives economic growth. As GDP grows, there's often a reduction in poverty because of economic prosperity and better living conditions. For example, since 1978, China has had a GDP growth of close to 10% per year, enabling more than 850 million people in China to be lifted out of poverty. Similarly, India has seen a decrease in poverty from 46% to 13.4% of the population over the 2 decades before 2015. And their GDP growth was between 3 and 9% per year over those 2 decades. These technological advances in both the areas of education and well-being enable us to flourish. In education, technology provides teachers, students, and professionals with resources to learn actively, collaborate with peers, and thrive either in the classroom or at work. When it comes to well-being, technology also promotes economic growth while reducing poverty. You may hear arguments based on fear today, but we urge you not to let the fear of the potential threats distract you from the very real advantages we have presented. We have grown up in an age of information and a culture driven by innovation. Because of that, we may forget how entangled our lives are with technology. So whenever a breach of privacy occurs, it's easy to become defensive so as to safeguard our personal identity and private information. But there are far too many areas of our lives where technology has benefited both our individual and communal flourishing. It would be foolish to dismiss the advantages of technology at the expense of what could happen. So I urge you to join us today in affirming the resolution that the advantages of modern technology outweigh the threat posed to privacy. Thank you.
Our esteemed colleague is right to bring up this debate is about human flourishing, yet she has missed the crucial piece of this debate. This is about safety versus efficiency, and our team will illustrate to you how the safety of your personhood, the safety of your flourishing is paramount in our new society. Yes, we agree that the flourishing of the human body is massively important, which is why it's better to have ultrasounds and medical tech rather than using leeches or guesstimation. However, there are critical costs and crucial things that must be addressed. Patients and individuals who use health technologies may be unaware of how their information is collected, used, or disclosed. Data privacy policies associated with these technologies are not all the same, are not clear to the user, and may not accurately state how information is being used or spread. Even if policies do address these issues, the language is buried under legal jargon so that a layperson has no hope to understand what is being taken from them. Companies, insurance, and otherwise are taking this information, your information, to tailor and even refuse insurance to certain individuals. Another aspect that our opposition brought up was how this helps education. How does this help education for kids who can't afford computers? In California alone, schools are closing for the rest of the year because their students don't have access to a computer. So they are missing out on education because we are so reliant on technology, not to mention the rampant depression and lack of social skills that are plaguing the young people of our nation. The lack of alternatives that this technological age is enforcing poses a colossal threat to our society, and directly limits human flourishing, not only in our security, but our well-being, health, mental, and physical. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for joining our debate and simultaneously acknowledging the importance of our discussion tonight. This debate is for you. My fellow team members and I are here to present to you what you already know. We regard your rights as bound and determined. I doubt that you woke up this morning and before rolling out of bed, asked yourself what privacy was or how much you valued and depended on it. And yet, here we are. Our team is committed to the fundamental concept that each one of us and each one of you is completely equipped to provide an accurate definition of privacy. The reason for this ability? Because our fundamental understanding of privacy is innate. For the sake of clarity, we lay out to you our definition of privacy. Private spaces are considered the body, the mind, the home, property, and personal information. The violation of privacy can come in many forms: data sharing, visual surveillance, communication interception, government access to data, workplace monitoring, communication data retention, the mandating of identity cards, and medical and finance history. Privacy is a fundamental value. The provision of privacy, in a very deep sense, acknowledges that individuals are ends in themselves beyond the use that they have to others. To possess privacy is to require a degree of respect. Alternatively, surveillance reduces individuals to objects. When our privacy, individual and communal, is violated, we are violated. When our privacy is valued, we are valued. When our privacy is threatened, we are threatened. Due to the invasive nature of technological advancement, we have lost respect for individual dignity, which should be the basis of our society. When our privacy is taken away, we become data. Of course, my team and I are not arguing that there are no benefits to technology. We see the benefits even now as we communicate over Zoom. However, it is paramount to acknowledge how our privacy, our ability to log into our computer without wondering if someone is behind the webcam watching us, has increasingly become second to the advances of technology. It doesn't appear to be a big deal when, after talking about Panera bread with a friend, ads on my phone pop up for Panera's new deal. There is no permission involved here. You spoke, they heard. However, in their defense, you spoke. You said you wanted Panera. Your phone and its architects are only listening to cater to your needs. What are we supposed to do? Hide our phones every time we interact with another? And yet we are speaking on a micro level. How much more can technology do when they have your entire debit card information, email, text, passwords, etc. on one device? We are not here to scare you, but to urge you to acknowledge the reality of the daily, hourly violation of our privacy. Unfortunately, we don't realize the gravity of our privacy until it is threatened. We enjoy being able to efficiently communicate and use Google Maps in order to effortlessly navigate our location. There is nothing wrong with such benefits. We don't deny that we enjoy these things, and we are confident that you would not either. Yet, at what point will we acknowledge that we have surrendered our privacy? We have surrendered our privacy. We must realize the warnings being issued. If we continue in this decline and willingly submit to the violation of our rights for the greater cause, or in this case, benefits of efficiency, we will soon reach a point in which our property, what rightfully belongs to us, is no longer ours. At what point does the coined phrase, nothing to hide, nothing to fear, become the justification for the opening of our lives, our personal information, for public and private consumption? This might look like your neighbor typing your name into Google and seeing the significant amount of data the web provides when they were only looking for your birthday. It could also look like a corporate company catering to you, but by designing ads specifically for you. Or it could take the form of something much more nefarious. No one is more conscious of their vulnerability than tech companies themselves. That is why they constantly attempt to convince you that they are concerned with your privacy. That is why they spend millions of dollars lobbying. They would not need to lobby as vigorously if they were so certain about the value of their products or services for the good of users and society. If our information were not valuable, as we are often made to believe, why would companies and governments spend billions to obtain our information? French philosopher Michel Foucault notes that knowledge is an instrument of power. By protecting our privacy, we prevent others from being empowered with knowledge about us that can be used against our interests. Powerful people and institutions make us act and think in ways in which we would not act and think because of their influence over us. It is not news to us that tech giants such as Facebook and Google are powerful. However, to grasp how institutions accumulate and exercise power in the digital age, we must examine the relationship between power, knowledge, and privacy. The more that someone knows about us, the more they can anticipate our every move and thus influence. Friends, we are not here to tell you what you do not know, but to remind you of your innate right. Throughout this debate, we will discuss statistics, individuals, practices, and benefits of technology. Our goal is not to refute any possible benefits for technology. Our goal is to promote and emphasize worth. Your worth, our worth. Our team values technology, but more critically, we value you. Thank you.
Hello. The other team has pointed out some fears that we often find in our life of how much should we value our own privacy? How much weight do we put into an idol such as that? When does it become dangerous to withhold information? And when does it become beneficial to give that information away? One thing that I would like to point out is a recent researcher in ethics of information technology, Marco Filicindio, noted that because of our information sphere, so much has grown. We have constant information in touch with us. We can interact with so many different fields, and that has made us a better judge of what we can trust and what we cannot trust. So when the other team says that we are more influenced by these targeted ads, they are ignoring the point that once we know and we interact with so much information, we have a much better idea of what is accurate and what is not, and we become more protective of our thoughts and worth. On top of that, when we look at targeted ads and companies that store information such as our credit card information, we're looking into things and people who need that kind of information. So people who pay for targeted ads are those who are small companies who are trying to sell what they have to us. It is an encouragement to our economy. The International Organization of Standardization and International Electronical Commission have come together and created a guideline for how international organizations and governments across the world can interact with our personal information. That includes our credit card information for making international purchases. That includes any international globalization apps such as Instagram, Facebook. There are a set of guidelines that these organizations must follow, and they must plainly explain what they mean. That is why when we open apps for the first time, they give us a little fun presentation that we can go through, and it sends us straight to our settings so that we can control them ourselves. If we just take the time to go through and make sure that we know and we understand what the settings are and what we're allowing people onto, it's not like they're trying to trick us. Being transparent is good for a company. It brings them more business and it helps them make more money. And in that case, we benefit from the capitalist mentality. We benefit from them wanting to make sure we can trust them so we can renew our business with them. And as for credit card information, there are many acts that protect us from the theft of those things. The Billy Graham Bliley Act is just one example that has so many different aspects that can protect us from invasion of privacy on so many levels.
Good evening. As my teammate Melody explained in our opening statement, we believe that the advantages of modern technology promote human flourishing in education, well-being, safety, and health. I will expand upon these last 2 points of safety and health. Public safety and privacy are often pitted against each other, in our society. However, we do not want to reduce this debate down to an either or, a one at the cost of the other. Rather, we propose that many advantages in technology increase our safety at little to no cost to our privacy. An example of this is Estonia's digital government, which they adopted in the 1990s. This completely online system manages personal records, including taxes, voting, health records, and residency status. This information is not stored centrally, and Estonian residents can see who has access to their data, resulting in complete transparency and ownership of their data. This safeguarded digital system has made Estonia's court system the second most efficient in Europe. Further, an advanced blockchain technology prevents the Estonian government and outside threats from manipulating user data. This technology contributes to the safety and privacy of every Estonian resident. Beyond Estonia, technology has enabled law enforcement to quickly identify suspects and respond to potential threats. According to the National Institute of Justice, the combined DNA index system allows the FBI to use DNA from past cases to identify potential suspects, as well as prove the innocence of those falsely accused. Many major cities use ShotSpotter to detect gunshots and notify police, resulting in a 66% reduction in shootings per square mile in Oakland, California. And law enforcement uses mapping software to track crime data, allowing them to allocate resources and inform the community of crime activity. These technologies continue to contribute to the safety of society without compromising our privacy. Besides assisting law enforcement, technology helps us in a more immediate way by providing life-saving diagnoses and treatments. Online medical records, telemedicine, and medical equipment demonstrate how reliant our health is on technology. Whole genome sequencing is one example of medical technology that provides a more accurate and less invasive diagnosis. Genetic disorders are the leading cause of infant deaths in the US. With whole genome sequencing, an infant can be accurately diagnosed in days rather than months, which is critical for their survival. In 2018, Rady Children's Hospital found that genome sequencing reduced hospital costs by an estimated $120,000 per patient. Further, acts like HIPAA and GINA protect genome privacy. Whole genome sequencing technology provides faster and more accurate diagnoses. Telemedicine is another cost-effective and accessible technology that allows health providers to care for patients by video chat, remote monitoring, and other electronic communications. By using telemedicine in 2016, the Veterans Health Administration saw a 59% decrease in overnight hospital stays for chronic illnesses, as well as a 32% decrease in hospital admissions for mental health services. For patients in rural areas, telemedicine removes the burden of traveling for a simple cold or checkup. Doctors can monitor blood pressure or heart rate round the clock in order to better understand a patient's condition. Today, more than ever, we are realizing the value of telemedicine in a time when hospitals are overwhelmed by COVID-19 patients. Beyond telemedicine, this pandemic heightens our awareness of the necessity of technology. Medical professionals are able to quickly communicate recommendations to the general population. Utilizing widespread testing technology allows us to isolate infected individuals and decrease the spread. For severe cases, ventilators and ICUs are essential. This pandemic highlights the need for medical technology, as well as the dangers of dismissing technology's advantages. It is irresponsible to not use technology to save the lives of millions. These values of safety and health, along with education and well-being, are important parts of our lives. Privacy is also important, but it cannot be put on a pedestal at the expense of these other values. There are ways to mitigate potential threats to privacy so that our privacy is still valued and we can fully enjoy the real and often essential advantages that technology provides. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. The negative case does not quarrel with the technologies that 50 years ago we could only dream of in science fiction novels, which were then actually created with so much faith in their power to unite us and to make us freer. We are simply disturbed by the individuals behind the technology, their capabilities, for they have already co-opted technology into an instrument of surveillance, behavioral manipulation, radicalization, and addiction. The British political theorist Stephen Lukes asserts that oftentimes a system is produced wherein people desire that which is actually against their own interests as a result of the manipulation of power. Knowledge is power. The more invisible the means of power, the more powerful it is. We believe that technology possesses this invisible power over each and every one of us. We are increasingly seduced by technology. This is not just targeted ads. We are seduced by technology. The data economy has succeeded in normalizing certain ways of thinking. Corporations and their bureaucratic proponents want you to think that if you've done nothing wrong, you have no reason to object. They want you to think that treating your data as a commodity is necessary for digital tech and that digital tech is progress, even when it may look worryingly akin to social and political regress. This is what progress looks like, and progress cannot be stopped. I beg you not to submit as a mindless consumer, for this is clearly corporate and bureaucratic duplicity. Need I remind you of the depravity of humankind, of the true temptation of greed that corrupts and distorts? Individuals in the real world, unfortunately, do not abide by the standards of the Gordon bubble. The trend line regarding the harm of technological power is moving consistently in a negative direction. The negative case possesses righteous fear for not only the controlling corporate and governmental powers, but also for the degraded and dwindling public square. Furthermore, we have concerns about artificial intelligence and the technological displacement of labor. And finally, the addictive technologies that have captured our attention are making us antisocial beings, contrary to our biblical call to relationship. The rise of suicide, loneliness, and depression are all implicated in this debate, unfortunately. These are not potential threats. Technology is not a potential threat. It is a current threat. They are in our midst this very day. All in all, technology and this digital life is now threatening our psychological, social, political, spiritual, and economic well-being. Talk about human flourishing, am I right? The affirmative case does little, if anything, to address this in their rosy, idealistic view of technology. Thank you.
Friends, we are here to remind you of the respect that you as a human being deserve, which is of greater worth than the convenience of technology. As we've said earlier, privacy is something we know innately, so it's been largely a non-legal concept, but the Fourth Amendment states that Americans have the right to be secure in their identity, property, and papers from unreasonable searches and seizures without a proper warrant. This amendment also shows us that privacy has always been a concern of our citizens, since even before the American Revolution. Other privacy laws have taken effect since then, but on 9/11, the world was changed forever, after which modern technology was increasingly used for intelligence gathering and surveillance. There are very strong privacy laws in some places. Canada holds 28 laws protecting private data, including safeguards against surveillance and workplace monitoring. Ireland has refused to use biometrics on identity cards, despite it being an EU regulation. Actually, Ireland was one of the leaders in overturning the EU's data retention directive. Other countries, though, are not so willing to deny technology the ability to exploit people's lives. In China, it is mandatory for anyone over age 16 to have an identity card. Facial recognition cameras are set up in public that can send an image of a jaywalker to a large screen to publicly shame them. These cameras also track and monitor the Muslim minority in China. The Chinese are concerned that new privacy violations, such as public temperature scanning and mandatory QR code scanning in order to enter their own homes, will not go away when the coronavirus does. In Russia, companies such as Tinder are required to hand over data to the government when requested, and if they refuse to comply, they are blocked. India has the largest biometric database containing the bank accounts, purchases, and insurances of 1.23 billion people. This is not theoretical, this is reality. This collecting of information would not be possible without modern technology. We are fortunate to live in a country that has laws that try to protect our privacy, but technology allows for privacy to be violated despite this. So let's look at what's in your pocket. Your iPhone has a SIM card in it, which means Apple tracks your location. Hackers know how to turn on your phone's camera without you knowing, and apps like YouTube have a capability to turn on your microphone at any time. Your provider keeps a record of every call you make. Go to any website on the internet, and at the least, that website has your IP address, location, and internet provider. According to research done by the University of Maryland, hackers are now attacking computers once every 39 seconds. Since the quarantine, cyber attacks have skyrocketed, as over 500,000 Zoom accounts have been sold on hacker forums for less than a penny each, including the victim's password, personal meeting URL, host key, and email address. The reality is that our private information is actively sought out. The primary purpose of tech companies like Google is to collect information on you. But what if this information was obtained by the wrong hands? Have we forgotten the lessons of history not even a century ago, when leaders gathered private information into lists of people to categorize them based on their genetics and their religion to hurt them? It has always come down to collecting information and making lists, and modern technology creates that opportunity. The key difference in technology now is compared to 100 years ago now, technology is far faster and prettier. Information sharing is more efficient than ever and even more tempting. Companies like Instagram appeal to our egos, letting us make a page all about ourselves, but they ask us to pay for the platform, not with money, but with information, such as your phone number. Consumerism and self-infatuation have covered the real scam that we are losing our privacy, and we are giving it away to people behind the technology who want power and money. We need to start honestly assessing the cost of technology, because we need to be honest with ourselves that humans have and will use private information for harm. The patterns of history, statistics from other countries, and the research that's been done in our own country reveal this. And sadly, this conversation is years too late. We're not trying to scare you, but just inform you of the reality we live in. We need to protect our privacy because we need to protect our personhood. Yes, modern technology makes life more efficient, but at the cost of exploiting people's lives. The benefits of technology are not worth that.
It is important to be clear about the parameters of this discussion. We recognize that there are real challenges introduced as we innovate and broaden the scope of human possibilities. The advancement of the human race through the use of powerful ingenuity has introduced new challenges. However, we have established a wide range of benefits, from health to safety to education to faith, embedded in the advent of modern technology, and have related those to the specific topic of privacy. Megan, you juxtapose leeches and guesstimation against ultrasounds to show the advances in medical technology, and then cited legal arguments that asked for your consent as your primary frustration with modern technology. It seems self-evident that these two things are not even close to comparable. The ease provided to pregnant women knowing that they will have advanced medical care and not be subjected to guesstimation and high infant mortality rates are greater than the ease of not having to read Apple's terms and conditions. Kat, you state the bureaucrats want to treat your data as a commodity. This is far from the truth. The attitude from thought leaders has been far from apathetic or ignorant. Concerns over privacy have greatly impacted the legal system as nonprofits and governments have quickly responded to new innovations with guidelines. For instance, regulations were promptly administered following the incredible useful invention of cookies. Websites cannot share data that you share to them with other domains, and they can only keep limited but important information about you. The political system has responded as the Swedish people elected a political party entirely dedicated to broadening privacy in the EU. And the private sector more broadly has responded with complex privacy protection innovations both on and offline. For instance, the cybersecurity industry is valued at over $100 billion. Technology is so ingrained in our way of life that it is easy to subconsciously diminish its widespread benefits. Tech innovations in the last 100 years have greatly improved quality of life for humanity, from agricultural improvements that have given us the ability to feed the world to transportation systems that have carried that food to hungry mouths. We hope that the silent ubiquity of modern technology will not prevent you from seeing its profoundly positive impacts on our lives.
Well, we now, as an audience, have time for some questions and answers. And so folks in our Zoom space are invited to send your questions via the question and answer function, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Remember that we're looking for specific, relatively succinct questions, and we ask that you direct them towards one team or the other. We'll take just a few minutes to receive the questions, and then Joanna will appear to ask the first question.
Good evening. The first question is directed to the Pro team. You have laid out lots of benefits to technology, but how do these benefits outweigh all of the threats to privacy that the con team has outlined?
I'll take this one. Yeah, I don't believe that any of those threats to privacy really would exist without the technology that causes all of these benefits. And to say that it outweighs, we're talking about trading improvements in saving people's lives, bringing people out of extreme poverty where they have nothing to eat day after day. We're comparing that to, yes, some real threats to privacy, but mostly speculation. And actually, as the other team admitted, places like Canada and Ireland taking privacy seriously. There are ways to mitigate threats. As I believe Cam mentioned, there is a huge business in cybersecurity protecting people from those very threats. So we just don't believe that privacy concerns can really outweigh the advantages that we see that are real tangible advantages.
All right, this next question is for the con team. While Zoom has been hacked and we understand the danger that poses, how much more would the COVID-19 pandemic negatively impact the economy and thus human flourishing if we could not use technology to communicate?
Thank you for your question. It's an excellent one. I think the best person to answer your question is Ms. Megan Haynes, so let me turn it over to her.
Thank you so much for your question and for tuning into this debate. While none of us here are claiming to be experts in economics, and we're not here to mitigate the fact that the ability to have Zoom technology is beneficial, there are many other things to consider than just the efficiency of transporting communication. For instance, in a study done by the University of Maryland, like my partner Bella said, every 39 seconds, information is being hacked. Along with that, once you've been hacked once, as a cybersecurity firm called Webroot showed, if you've been hacked once, there's a 50% chance that you'll be hacked again in that same year. With this Zoom economy now that we're based in, the Zoom intellectual economy, how much more are we risking that we need to be aware of as we're going through this? That's what our side is trying to say. Not that all of this technology is bad, however, that there are certain risks that must be assessed and not just left to the wayside.
Again, thank you for your question.
All right, this question is now for the pro team. How would you address the issues of social media and cyberbullying? Many individuals can film or take photos of people without their permission and post them. How has technology solved these issues?
In a way, technology has made it easier to bully and take advantage of each other. But it is good to keep in mind that those are not everybody using social media. In fact, it can be a way of uplifting each other. For example, there are a few Gordon College social medias that are built to build each other up during this quarantine, and they've been super helpful for keeping up our mentality of what is good and what is lovely in the world still. On top of that, we are called to be good stewards of ourselves and our relationships. So we must not let the people who use these things for bad let us forget the people that do use it for good. We can mitigate those influences by asking people not to use social media for poor reasons. We have ways of reporting their rude comments or vicious content. In that way, we are keeping tidy our spaces on the social web, and we are also able to give encouragement and good news for others.
I have a secondary add-on to this. I think it's important to consider both sides and the opportunities that social media actually introduced. Take the story of a local Ipswich girl, Talia Duff, who was diagnosed with a rare and debilitating disease. Through social media and crowdfunding efforts, the family was able to raise $1.3 million to fund research efforts from around the country. Modern technology connected 5,000 donors to researchers around the country. The majority of those donors and researchers have never met Talia. This is just one of the many examples of individuals who have been empowered by modern technology. We just want to encourage people to consider that there are both sides, and it is not, social media is not ubiquitously bad.
I would just like to add that in addition to what my teammates have already talked about, a lot of social media accounts have ways for us to look at and report inappropriate content. So especially on Instagram, you can report posts that were inappropriate, but also Snapchat has an entire department dedicated to monitoring and filtering through Snapchats to find bullying and results like that. And then they delete accounts accordingly. So a lot of the things with social media and people today, it's up to us to hold one another accountable. So if we are active with respect to what we see on social media, we can help decrease the bullying that we see around.
Thank you. All right, this next question is for the con team. If history has shown that humans will violate privacy and use our private information against us, doesn't that demonstrate that humans and not technology are the problem?
Thank you for your question. Your point is well taken that remembering human nature as it kind of comes into play with technology is important. And the distinction between humanity and the benefits of technology can get blurry sometimes. However, I think Kenny Kidd has a good answer to your question, so I'll turn this over to him.
Yes, thank you again for the question. I would entirely agree with you that the problem is humans rather than technology. What hasn't been addressed in this debate is that technology is fundamentally a tool that can be used for good or for bad. And we are discussing the benefits and detriments of it as relates to the threat to privacy and to the benefit of the public and private good. Now, the affirmative side's contention is that human flourishing is brought about more thoroughly in education, well-being, safety, and health through technology and the benefits it provides. There are ways to... It is equally true that with the advance of modern technology, there are detriments to each of these aspects of life and well-being. Now, with safety, for example, they made the claim that public safety and privacy are not an either-or situation, when that's really sort of foundationless and not quite true. Every example that was brought about by Catherine in pointing out how the public safety was exacerbated through modern technology was an example of privacy being infringed upon. And when it's for the sake of public safety, that's wonderful. But there are so many other examples of technology being used to invade privacy with no public good effect. For example, information theft, loss, or attack is now the prevalent type of crime against organizations, overpowering physical theft, which until 2017 was the most common type of fraud against corporations for a decade. Over 50% of devices that got infected, as Megan said, were reinfected within the same year. And now cybercrime now accounts for more than 50% of all crimes in the UK. These are examples of human nature. It's not a problem with technology, it's how it's used. So when we are talking about the advance of modern technology, we need to keep in mind human nature, because that is what this discussion boils down to.
Thanks, Kenny. I'd like to also introduce Kat Corbin, who will continue elaborating on the question.
Sorry, I'm actually going to address the question before because my hand was raised, but nobody saw me. So I would like to say that yes, Zoom is helping us college students continue on in our college journey, but look at the rest of the United States. What's happening? Technology isn't really helping there. People are losing their jobs. So to say that this technology in this situation has been the answer, I think would be an issue for those who are now unemployed, the 25%. So yes, thank you.
All right, this next question is for the Pro Team. You mentioned surveillance in law enforcement as a positive tool. However, technology is never neutral. It is influenced by its users. How can we be sure that law enforcement uses this technology not to take advantage or disadvantage of groups?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for that. I would just like to point out that there are a lot of protections against that and regulations for law enforcement. It's not that police in the US can just go and look up things whenever they want. They have very strict regulations. For example, with the DNA, the CODIS, which is a DNA index system that I was talking about, this can only be used for identifying people who have committed violent crimes. So there's a limited subset of crimes that they're allowed to use it for. They're not allowed to use it for any medical information or to make any family connections. And if someone is not convicted, the DNA sample is destroyed and removed from the database. And so this is just one example of the fact that there are ways to mitigate potential threats and other things like that protect people's privacy and also increase their safety.
In addition to that, police in many areas of the country have to wear body cams when they are arresting suspects or even in sometimes routine traffic stops. This helps to mitigate the threat to certain groups of people from police officers that they might perceive due to their race or something else that places them in a minority group or simply in a group. Body cams help keep police accountable. Using those well can help protect those people who might be targeted in the first place.
To add to Micah's statement, and as the other team has pointed out, technology is simply a tool. We cannot depend on it. We hope that public safety personnel is not solely using technology to base their proof and identification of a perpetrator, a potential perpetrator, that is. We do trust that the people in those positions are using the tools necessary to allow them to be more efficient, but it is not, we also at the same time trust that it is not the sole reliance that they are utilizing to make those decisions for the safety of our public.
Yeah, and quickly to add too, I think it's really important to get specific. While the negative cases uses words like surveillance and corporate bureaucrats who are spying, it's important to look at what has actually been done here domestically. And the act that that created and established the Department of Homeland Security came complete with a mandatory privacy officer and a civil liberties officer, both responsible for ensuring that privacy and civil liberties are lawfully protected. The NSA established minimization procedures to ensure that a human being only ever examined a minuscule fraction of what the government collected for counterterrorism purposes. And only in those cases when there was existing reasonable suspicion that those telephone numbers in question were connected to terrorist plots. And so those are the data and the facts to support that this is not some widespread surveillance state as our fear likes to tend to believe.
All right, thank you. All right, this is for the con team. Is there evidence, research that shows technology has caused the decrease of social skills, and how does that relate to privacy?
Excuse me. Another excellent question. And yes, there is research that shows a correlation between the rise in technology, particularly in education, and the decreasing of social skills in young people these days. It can even be seen just in a generational gap. And it is an alarming trend, as a matter of fact. To continue answering your question, I would like to introduce Kenny Kidd.
Yes, thank you for that question. There was a Vox article released a while ago called "Have Smartphones Really Destroyed a Generation? We Don't Know," which plays off the title of an extremely popular article released by The Atlantic, where the writer summarizes that there is a clear correlation between rising trends in smartphone and social media usage and teen depression, anxiety, loneliness, and suicidal ideation. And large surveys of 500 plus adolescents reveal a clear, statistically significant correlation between increased screen time and suicidal ideation, diagnoses of depression and anxiety, and less well-being. Now, it is apparent that despite a correlation not quite equaling a causation, there are those who spend 7 or more hours on electronic devices per day are twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression than those who spend 1. The average user of electronic devices, however, is less likely to be significantly affected. This shows a clear benefit in using modern technology less and a significant danger in using them more. And the average high schooler has been 10% more lonely and 10% more likely to get less than 7 hours of sleep a night than the release of the iPhone as well. Now, this is all correlational, of course. However, it is hard to find another correlation that could lead to this sort of causation. And researchers have been trying to find this correlation, but there is a clear connection between the onset of social media usage, addiction, and technology usage to this sort of detriment to individual well-being, especially in adolescence.
Another alarming trend that we're seeing is that youth with iPhones or access to technology would rather interact with their friends or their peer group on that technology as opposed to going and hanging out or spending time with that group in person. Even a generational change a few generations ago, even one generation ago, that was not the case. Again, continuing answering your question, I would also like to introduce Kat Corbin.
Hi there. Yes, thank you for your question. I remember that at the end it says, how does this relate to privacy? And I would like to just note that even though these statistics that we're throwing out right now about the decline of happiness rates, people are now lonely and depressed, even though that may not directly correlate to privacy, there are two sides to this debate. So it's the benefits. Are these benefits really all that beneficial? I would like to also note that you can see it in yourselves. This is likely true for you, but I know at least for me, when I was about 10 years old, I was an avid reader. I would read for hours. Snow days, you'd see me snuggled up by my window on a couch reading for hours. Now I struggle to read for over 1 to 2 pages before I get distracted. I go to my phone. What's on my phone? So these educational benefits that are being proposed to you, I just find a lot of issue with. Thank you. I'll stick with that.
Thank you. All right, another question for the pro team. Okay, could you please address technology's impact upon the economic disparity between the global north and south?
Sure, I would love to address that. Thank you for the question. The impact of economic inequality in the global north and south, as viewed by an economics major who has taken intermediate macroeconomics, I believe, and so do at least Dr. Young, a professor here at Gordon College, that the inequality is not driven by exploitation. It is not driven by somehow us having more and them having less. It is driven by technology allowing easier production. It is driven by these increases that allow us to make more things out of the same resources. Yes, that causes the global north to benefit a lot more than the global south when the technology is in the global north. But as we mentioned earlier with our statistics about India and China, they have recently begun to adapt more technology, and their GDP per capita, the defining statistic of well-being used by economists, has shot through the roof. 10% growth per year, unheard of. It is not because China was being oppressed by the global north before that. It is because they adapted technology and they began using it in a way that actually works, capitalism, and using it in a more free market way. Of course, China is still communist, but they are much more free market than they used to be. Thank you.
I think this point was also raised by Megan when she pointed out the inequalities within the education system, where I think she mentioned her home state of California lacking certain technologies, if I heard her correctly. And she's right to point out, and that is something that we need to address. But I think an apt comparison would be following the invention of cars. Only the wealthiest of the wealthy were allowed to have cars, but that didn't mean that we stopped the production of cars or didn't advance in that direction. It meant that the opposite was true. We created more cars and we wanted to have more people have access to them, and look at where we are today. And another point that we need to bring up too is the expansion of fintech. Fintech is in the Western world what we can think of as Apple Pay, Venmo, but really in third world countries, what it looks like, or the global South, what it looks like is people having access to banks for the first time. So no longer do people need traditional bankers. In fact, with AI, there can be robotic brokers and people that can give advice, or AI gives advice to people in the global South, where this would totally have never been an option even 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So technology is expanding opportunities both in the global North, but actually more rapidly in the global South.
Thank you. All right, we have time for one last question to the con team. You mentioned in your introduction that privacy is an innate right. Why is this the case?
Thank you for asking. I think to answer your question, I would pose to you a scenario, a hypothetical. Take, for instance, you are having a conversation with a friend of yours, but there's another person in the room that will not leave, that insists upon eavesdropping on your conversation. It makes having the conversation very difficult, and dare I say, one might even feel infringed upon. That feeling of being perhaps wronged or listened in on is evidence of a innate knowledge or an awareness of a right to privacy. That is what our team feels is essential and basic in humanity. So yes, we would say that privacy is innate. Again, I would like to introduce Bella Christian, who will also give an answer to this question.
I think Ben actually meant Megan Haynes.
First off, thank you for this question. It is so important, and to Ben's brilliant illustration. I would also just like to add, when we become reduced to numbers on a screen, bytes and bits that are transferred over the airwaves, do you really want that to be who you are? Do you want to be, Megan Haynes, blonde, type O blood? Is that all that I am supposed to be? There's so much more to who you are as a human that can be transmitted and taken away from you, your sense of identity stolen, even in extreme situations. In fact, airports in the United States as well as in Europe are trying to implement facial recognition software while you're traveling through an airport in order to speed up the process. You are the only one with your face and your fingerprint. And do you want this to be something that is taken, stored in some remote lodge, which maybe has 1 or 2 officers looking at it, which is vulnerable to being taken and hacked and stolen from you, your identity, your information? When privacy is infringed upon, you are being infringed upon. That's why we have the Fourth Amendment, so no one can enter your home. But now they're entering into your very life, your cell phone, your medical records, where you vote, where you go to church, who you talk to. Just look at China and some of the things that they track in their citizens. This is innate. There's no other way about it.
Thank you, Megan. That's correct. Sorry about that, Bella. And to finish answering that question, let me introduce Kenny Kidd.
Right. Very briefly, just to reiterate what Joanna said in our introduction, the provision of privacy in a very deep sense, just using her words, acknowledges that individuals are ends in themselves beyond the use that they have to others. To possess privacy is to require a degree of respect. And what this means is that when our privacy is valued, we are valued. When our privacy is not valued or respected, we are not valued or respected. It shows that there is something inherent to us and in us that makes us not a means to an end, that there is something about us that makes us have inherent value in our existence. When that information or when that privacy in us is accessible to anyone and everyone who wants it, then we have no individual value. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that makes for a poor foundation for a society. It's very dangerous. So we can debate over whether this right is innate or cultural, but what stands is that this right is just paramount to a functioning society of individuals.
All right, well, thank you. We'll now give the teams a few minutes just to ask questions of one another. And we'll begin with a question from the con side for the affirmative side.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd first like to thank the ProTeam for taking on the Adults Challenge to convince us that the benefits of modern technology outweigh issues concerning privacy. Since the ProTeam made a case for how technology drives GDP growth, I'd like to draw your attention to how the collection and analysis of data is changing the way economies operate. In her recent book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, Harvard Business School professor Shoshana Zuboff reveals a world in which technology users are no longer customers, but the raw material for an entirely new economic system. A good example to that claim is a recent lawsuit less than a month ago brought against Zoom, the very platform we are using for this debate, for illegally sharing user data with third parties like Facebook, obviously giving away such information like users, device model, location data, and advertising identifiers. My question, actually a two-part question to the ProTeam is, how do you justify the commodification of user data, especially given the fact that the user's consent is often violated? And two, how do you justify how this trade of personal data, again without the user's consent, actually concentrates enormous economic and political power in the hands of just a few people? Thank you.
Okay, yes. Thank you for your question, Nathaniel. To your point about Zoom, yes, there have been problems with using Zoom. I agree. Zoom admitted that and recently switched to using 100% of their workforce to work on improving security. Functions like being able to lock a Zoom conference call and being able to keep people in a waiting room when they first join have helped to mitigate problems with that. In addition, the very fact that a lawsuit can be brought against Zoom and prosecuted in the US courts shows that privacy is important to people. We are not saying that privacy is not a concern or that privacy is not a value we have. We are saying that technology can actually allow us to have privacy, and technology will grow and adapt to privacy because technology adapts. That's what it does.
And now we will hear a question for the con side coming from the pro side.
Hello. Sorry about that. Thank you guys for presenting a case that had a lot of social philosophy and stats, and we really appreciate the work that you've been putting into this argument. But one question that we really have on our minds right now is if we are as susceptible and have completely surrendered the privacy as you have led us to believe, what should we do now? How should we move forward with a world that is driven by this technology and in a lot of ways does present advantages? How should we move forward with the line of your argument?
You bring up an important distinction, and you're right. The debate would not be complete if we were not able to address the moving forward. Again, we want to reiterate first and foremost, there are advantages to modern technology. Zoom, for instance, is one of them. I'm a missionary kid. I call home all the time, and I thank God quite often for Skype. It's a wonderful invention. But there are protections that need to be put in place for some very real and modern threats that come with new advancements. So that the moving forward is tricky. And I think to answer that, I would like to introduce Kenny Kidd. He'll have very good thoughts on this subject.
I don't have much more to add, but I would like to, I would like to say again that the contention of this debate is fundamentally the advantages of modern technology outweigh the threats to privacy. And our side is really just trying to put forward that this is not true. This is a debate more of value than policy necessarily. We are not obligated to put forward a policy in place. However, if we don't, that's a shame, because then we're just like, oh, well, like our privacy is threatened. What do we do? I think that'd be an important topic for another debate, like a future debate after this. Our goal right now is really just to address that there is an issue with our privacy being infringed upon so that we can go from there. I have some ideas for how to do that I'll bring up in the conclusion. But yeah, as of now, we think that there is not, the focus on the threat to privacy is not strong enough as of now, and a lot of people are not aware of that, and we just want to bring that forward, and because it's important to address that. But we'll address that more at the conclusion. Did that answer your question?
To finish answering that question, I would also like to point the attention to Kat Corbin.
Sorry again. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. And that's something that I have really personally invested research in because I find it so very important. Even if policy does not change and it's not necessarily realistic for that, there are personally things that we can do. And we don't want to just be fear mongers who leave you with that and then say, okay, you're off on your own. There are ways that you can help protect your private information. For instance, if you sign up for American Eagle, a clothing company, and they ask for you to be on their email and you want this discount, I want the discount, you can write in your name, Dr. Private Information. There you go. You are making it clear that you will not give your consent freely to them. Also, I would say, that you should make it a practice not to expose others online, not to film or photograph others without their consent. There are very clear things that we can do. If a person were to come up to you and ask for your phone number, for your email, for all of your personal information, what would you do? Most people would probably, if they're really bugging them, give them a false email, false phone number. I advise you to do that if you are very concerned about privacy and don't see policy solving the issues anytime soon.
Well, that brings us to the end of our time for questions and answer. And so we're going to move now to our final concluding statements. And we will begin with the pro side.
Thank you all for listening, and thank you to CTS and Gordon College for setting this all up. It's amazing what we can do with modern technology used well. It is only by the expertise of CTS in using technology that we are even able to have this debate. It is our belief that the evidence we have presented shows conclusively that modern technology brings human flourishing through the advantages brought to education, well-being, safety, and health. We have shown this especially in the areas of education through increasing access to learning tools. Additionally, Megan brought up the point that some people in schools in California are not able to have school because they don't have computers. Of course, she didn't mention that all the rest of the people who are able to have school right now are doing so because they have computers. In the absence of that technology, no one would be able to have school in the middle of a pandemic. Think on that. We also have shown this in communication through the internet, health through the benefits of whole genome sequencing. Currently, vaccines are being made for COVID-19, and they're much more rapidly been able to be made because the genome was sequenced. This allowed us to know much more about the virus than we would have otherwise. Despite the concerns of privacy brought up by the negative side, although largely anecdotal and hypothetical, such as phones hearing us when we speak about Panera Bread, despite research showing that this claim is unfounded, and there are no statistics to back that up. Surveillance, which then they admitted is easily mitigated by government interference. And I think one of our points is that the government can and does help us to use technology well and to protect our privacy. Some examples of this are HIPAA and GINA. I do not believe that the negative really weighed the impact of these laws. Under HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, protected health information cannot be shared without legal consequences in the United States. In one of the earlier statements, or perhaps a rebuttal, someone mentioned that your medical information is just out there to be stolen. This is not true. If it is hacked or taken in any way, there are legal consequences for those who did not take the steps to protect it. Going further, GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, under that, it is illegal for employers or insurers to require or request genetic information or to discriminate on the basis of genetic information. I want you to ask yourselves, are you truly prepared to give up the advantages in education, in well-being, in safety, and in health that you have gained from technology in order to preserve your privacy? We do not throw out our phones and laptops due to fear of a potential threat. We do not refuse life-saving treatment either. We as humans, what we do is we continue to progress. When we sense a threat, we find a way to mitigate it. I would also like to address the concern that AI will take people out of work. This is an easily refutable economic fallacy. This is something that the Luddites believed back in England in the 1500s and 1600s. They were worried that looms would take away their work. Instead, we are so much better off than we were back then. Even in the last 100 years, in the United States, GDP per capita has risen from around $6,000 per person to almost $60,000 per person. 10 times what it was. That is driven by technology. In order to conclude that the advantages of modern technology do not outweigh the threat to privacy, you must be convinced that that threat is so large and dangerous that you would be willing to go without a single one of the advantages we have discussed. If there is even one area of your life for which you are unable to do this, then join us in affirming the resolution. I ask you all, as the audience of this debate, to consider both sides and conclude what must be concluded. The advantages of modern technology outweigh the threat to privacy. Thank you.
And we will now, thank you, Micah. We will now turn to the concluding statement from the con side.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for taking the time to watch this debate. We hope it has been engaging and thought-provoking for you and sparks discussions after its close. Once again, the contention of this debate is that the benefits of modern technology outweigh the threats to privacy. But what we are really having here is a debate between the values of efficiency and safety. In asking Paul Parisi, the president and founder of Savior Labs, an IT company located on Cabot Street in Beverly, what the benefits of technology are now as compared to 100 years ago, he responded that technology is basically shinier and faster, making information sharing more efficient. We are simply arguing that the benefits of this increase in the efficiency that technology provides does not outweigh the costs, the invasions to privacy, and threats to everyone's individual and public safety. In fact, in our interview, when we told him the contention of this debate, this IT professional responded by saying that the debate is a decade or two too late, and that privacy is now fundamentally a myth. Now, the affirmative side has argued that human flourishing is brought about more thoroughly or more effectively through the benefits that modern technology provides, and that it does so through education, advances in well-being, safety, and health. Now, it may be true that the benefits of modern technology bring about more possibilities for education and brings about more, it allows people who would have had difficulty being educated in the past to have the opportunity now, but only for those with that possibility. Now, with nearly 30 million people unemployed due to COVID and roughly 20% of Americans under the poverty line, these possibilities serve the added function of expanding the rich-poor gap, which the affirmative side has not adequately addressed. Not to mention the detriment to privacy. Without access to this technology, we would not be able to go to school. Like granted, Micah said, we would not be able, I agree with Micah in that he said we would not be able to go to school without Zoom technology, but also that makes us, we have to use Zoom technology. We have to use our webcams, and everything online, which are so easily accessed and so easily exploited, and we are now forced into that. And that is only the more well-off, richer people. This serves these benefits in education serve the purpose of helping people who can use it, but this also expands the gap in the rich and the poor, creating much more societal tension and much more threats to privacy. He also claimed that technology drives economic growth. Now, there may be some truth in this, but this is also explicitly correlative and not causative. Now, with GDP per capita in certain countries being raised with technological advancements, that seems like a good That seems like a solid stat, but then you have to take into account people like Jeff Bezos, who have $155 billion, all due to like a technology, like Amazon, like technological advancements. Now, if one man makes $155 billion, while 50,000 make 10,000 less because of the opportunities that are not given to them because of technological advancement, the GDP per capita, I believe, would be raised. I'm no economist, but I believe that this economic growth is much more beneficial to the people who already are well off than the people who are not, thus expanding the rich-poor gap. Plus, this doesn't adequately address the threats to privacy, which are sound and true. Now, the claim that public safety and privacy is not an either-or is also, as I said previously, a foundationless claim. Each example used by the affirmative team as an example of privacy is also an example of privacy being infringed upon for the sake of public safety. Both obvious. No, here's the thing. Both are important. We're not arguing for like anarchy. We're not arguing for like we have to be individuals with like all of our privacy, all to ourselves, all the time. We're just saying that the threats to privacy are far too great right now and are not being adequately addressed. So I don't know. Saying that is I can't believe that. Now, a fully private community would be basically an anarchy, while a society driven fully by public safety would be equivalent to communism or totalitarianism. And then that is not an oversimplification. That's the foundation of that. And we've seen how that worked out. That's incredibly dangerous. Oh, and with regards to, excuse me while I flip this stat real quick, how medical technology, hang on, I have this thing here. Okay, yeah. There's a New York Times article that revealed how individuals and insurance companies can abuse medical information. Oh, yes, that's exactly it. Yes, there is an article written by 3 professionals in the IT field in medicine that showed how easy it is for, okay, there is a bill trying to be passed right now that would grant medical information to everyone individually through their cell phones and everything like that. And that's dangerous. Let me disregard that and get back to my original point. My apologies. Now, a final example for the dangers of technological advancement. Decades ago, Kevin Mitnick was put in prison for hacking and breaching privacy. Now that he is out of prison, he runs a lecture circuit and informs people on the dangers of information privacy. During one lecture, he simply said, "Is anybody here dumb enough to give me their name?" One man did. Within 15 to 20 minutes, Mitnick was able to access this man's most private information, reaching into his bank account. This is one man with resources available to everyone. The only thing differentiating him from anybody else is that he wanted to do this. This ability is present and accessible for anyone who wants to learn how. Your life can be derailed by sharing your name with the wrong person, and this would not be the case without the tools that modern technology offers. Which brings us to the idea that is yet to be addressed in this debate. That technology is a tool, neutral in itself, but brimming with possibilities for both good and evil, advantages and disadvantages. And every one of these advantages from tech advances carries a disadvantage and threat to privacy with it due to humanity's fallenness, and is bound to be exploited. In a perfect world, there'd be no need for this debate. The benefits resulting from technological advancement would bring us closer to heaven on earth, and no one would abuse these potentialities. However, this is not the case. We're fallen to sin, and we need to address this. What then do we do? Since I said earlier, this is a debate over values and not policy. It is superfluous to put forward alternatives or suggest policies, but due to the frightening nature of the debate, I think that what little advice we can offer is necessary. We can do what we can, and we can ask that legislators do what they can to protect our safety and liberty from these dangers. We can read the terms and conditions. We can think before we enter our information anywhere, research the privacy policies that make up technology that we use every day, and become more informed and prepared. We'll never have a day without complete protection of privacy, but with intentionality and effort, we can try to make the world a little safer, increasing awareness of the potential dangers in technology and demanding the protection and safety that we deserve as citizens. But we need to address that there is a problem first, that the benefits of the modern technology do not outweigh threats to privacy. I hope our side has made that clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny. Well, now is the time to vote. So again, let me say that this is an important role, and I would reiterate that you are voting not on the basis of your affinity to particular people, and not even on your opinion as to the matter at hand, but rather on which side has made the most compelling case for its position. On your screen should appear a poll, and that allows you to select either the pro or the affirmative or the negative case. You can vote only once, So if you are watching the debate with multiple people, you're going to have to come to an agreement as to who gets your vote. So please vote now, and I'll give a minute or two for people to cast their ballots. Well, we have a winner to announce. But before you do, I want to invite you and everyone with me to join me in applauding for both teams, even though neither team will hear it. This has been a long and strange journey for these JAFers, and they have pulled it off admirably. Again, let me say thank you also to the audience for coming and to attending, and thank you to both sides, and especially to the captains of both sides. The results: the pro team received 80 votes, and the con team received 67 votes, and so the win goes to the pro team. Congratulations. I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank in particular Nick from CTS, who provided the support on the technology end. Without him, this would not have been possible. Thank you all for coming and for participating. I hope you all have a good evening. Good night.